Governor, we're going to go to Conneautville for our first question. And this comes from Pat. Pat writes in, the state of Pennsylvania has an excise tax on a pack of cigarettes of $2.60. The tax stamp is levied at 7% of the cost to the seller. Federal excise tax is $1.01 per pack. A pack of the brand I smoke is $7. So 7%, there's a lot of numbers. 7% is 49 cents. Therefore, the taxes on cigarettes is $4.10. Then there's the 6% sales tax. She goes on through the numbers, but then says, do you see my point? At the end of the line here, I'm paying taxes on taxes. How is that constitutional?
Well, you pay taxes on taxes in a lot of different ways. The effort here was to build a tax, and I guess you could make the same argument about any tax. We're trying to pay for schools and roads and things with taxes, and we're trying to do the right thing here with a tax, in this case on cigarettes. The other thing about this particular tax is that it's a voluntary tax. You can actually take your tax rate to zero by just stopping smoking, and I'd urge Pat to maybe consider that.
And I will say, I've never smoked in my life. I haven't bought a pack of cigarettes since I was 8 years old. And
what?
Well, Dad, it was a different world. Dad would send you down to the place with a couple of bucks and say,
really?
bring me back a pack of Winston's.
I think your listeners should. We need to know more about this.
It was the 70s. It was a crazy time. You remember the 70s. No, they did. I remember very well going to, it was, the place is out of business now, so I can say the name. It was Cherry Lane Dairy in Chambersburg, right down the road from what was it? I'd walk down, 8, 9 years old, get a pack for Dad. So I looked up the numbers and I made sure she was right. And those numbers are correct.
Yeah,
no,
it's absolutely right.
Yeah. Rachel, we have email number 2.
Yeah, email number 2 comes from Beth in Crystal Spring, which is in Fulton County. And she writes, what is being done about the meth problem in our state? I feel that the punishment has not been stiff enough. We are having more and more calls for dump sites and mobile sites and now shootings in a peaceful town. I don't feel our laws are being enforced.
Yeah, I think they are. The state police really take this seriously. One of the issues, interestingly enough, is the federal government has clamped down on some of the raw materials that have gone into meth labs that you could just buy actually over the counter in drugstores.
Cold medicine.
Yeah. And so in doing that, it has actually, ironically, shifted the production of methamphetamines to Mexico. And so the meth problem is real. And Beth is right, but a lot of it is coming from outside of not only Pennsylvania but the United States. In terms of the meth labs, we actually have our own lab to try to track down not only fixed site labs but mobile labs, and our arrest rate is up. I would suspect it's hard to tell because we have this big heroin problem, and a lot of the violence that Beth might be seeing is from the heroin problem. But she raises a really important point because I don't think anybody really, because we're focused so much on heroin, it's not clear, what is going on in the world of meth. We don't have treatment for meth addiction, and so it's a real issue. I think in terms of law enforcement, the state is doing everything it can do, but in terms of the medical side of it, we're not doing much. And I'm not sure that the interdiction of imports of methamphetamines, which comes in all kinds of innocent-looking ways, is all that effective. So I think Beth is right in pointing out this is a real problem.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I selected this email for this month, because with all of the focus on opioids, we want to make sure that we also highlight the fact that, the other enforcement of other drugs, that's not being ignored.
It's not being ignored, but I think, again, Beth raises a great issue that we can't let the focus on the opioid epidemic take our eye off the need to continue to try to do something about the meth problem.
Also, Beth wrote in from Crystal Springs about meth, so that jumped out at me too when I read it. I just have one of those warped senses of humor.
You do.
Patty from Newcastle writes in, what is your position on House Bill 1010 for VGT gaming terminals, video gaming terminals? We think we elect intelligent representation, and all you guys can come up with is funding the balanced budget on the backs of gambling. Why don't you just sell the whole state to the casinos? Obviously, I think Patty's a little frustrated. Maybe doesn't like gambling so much. But we're now facing a possibly larger expansion of gaming than just the VGTs, and the proposal that could put up to 5 of those in establishments with a liquor license. We're looking at potential for internet gambling, that the Pennsylvania casinos could take their games online. So let's talk about the overall, not just the VGTs, but the overall gaming picture here, where you stand on that as a source of revenue.
Well, I mean, Patty's absolutely right. I mean, gambling has been a part of Pennsylvania, I think, since the early 70s when the lottery was put into place. And it is something that is in many ways attractive for lawmakers who don't want to impose a tax, and so they look to other sources of revenue, and one of those has been over the last couple decades gambling. So I tried to present a budget in February that is focused on streamlining government, $2 billion, over $2 billion of savings there. And the $1 billion that was on the revenue side was basically closing loopholes, mostly corporate loopholes, charging a severance tax for gas producers, for example. And so I think that's what we need to come back to, that we need to balance our budget. And I am doing everything I can to streamline government and make it more efficient, to the tune of over $2 billion, but the budget deficit has grown so big that we actually have to do something honest, and we can't keep kicking the can down the road, and we can't keep coming up with phony solutions. We've got to come up with something that's real, because we need good schools, we need highways, we actually need a legal system, we need people to keep us safe and secure in our homes and on our highways. So all those things take money, and I think, you know, Patty's right that to be frustrated, that there ought to be a real frustration, that we ought to just say, okay, let's do something here that actually addresses the real problem, not try to find some alternative that maybe is a feel good for most people, but you know is not really addressing the problem.
This would be revenue conceivably on paper, though it may not be your preferred form of revenue, but are you in a position now where you would say you would not, or you would try to block any expanded gambling proposal?
I've said all along where I am on gambling is you know, again, since we have the lottery and prior general assemblies and administrations have opened casinos. Let's whatever we do, let's be honest about it, and if it is something that really is wrong, we shouldn't do it. If it's something that simply transfers revenue from one gambling source to another, well, that doesn't make any sense. If the net result is zero increase, all we've done is shuffled the deck chairs on the Titanic. That doesn't make any sense. So, you know, I keep looking at revenue proposals that are out there, and we'll take a serious, respectful look at things, but I think they have to pass real mathematical muster.
All right, we're headed to Johnstown for our next question.
Yes, and this comes from Chris in Johnstown. He writes, would it be possible to pass legislation requiring counties to enact an income tax with the stipulation that the first increase eliminates property tax, the next increase to create a county police force, and the rest to take over infrastructure? That would go a long ways toward eliminating PA debt, easing the workload of the state police, and would be a nonpartisan accomplishment.
I always say I love how our listeners come up with their own ideas and proposals, and keep it up, Pennsylvania. I mean, I love hearing what people think. But how do you think a county income tax would go over?
Probably not real well. It would have to be. It depends. It would have to be done at the. There would have to be state legislation to enable that. and there are different county taxes in a number of areas. Philadelphia has one. I think Allegheny County has a regional asset district that has a sales tax. But those things have to be authorized by the state. But Chris brings up three things: property tax relief. Absolutely right. And we talked about that earlier in the program. Property tax relief is something I ran on, and that is crushing property owners, and it's also not good for many communities. I think, if we want to actually look at a fair way to address the revenue shortfalls that we have here in Pennsylvania, have had for decades, what's wrong with the severance tax? We're the second biggest producer of natural gas in the United States. All the other states that produce natural gas have a severance tax. I'm talking a reasonable one, not a punitive one. And the Independent Fiscal Office showed that would be paid by 75% of that would be paid by people not in Pennsylvania, because it would be folded into the price of talk about taxes on taxes, would be folded into the price of the product that had this Pennsylvania natural gas in it. So only 25% of this tax would be paid by Pennsylvanians, and it would mean hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. To me, that's a fair one. Another thing that Chris mentioned was paying for highways. We actually pay for that separately. We don't pay for that in the general fund, and so
and that got a big boost in the last few years.
Right, back before I
Right.
became governor,
Right.
Act 89 actually put some money into that. So a lot of the highway construction and bridge construction you see right now in Pennsylvania roads are a result of that. And so, that does not come out of the general fund. So I appreciate Chris's suggestions. My goal would be, or my preference would be, to have a fair severance tax.